It began with a whisper one that echoed through the stone halls of Windsor Castle. As Prince Philip's will was quietly unsealed, a chilling clause emerged, one that no one expected and many feared. Prince Edward, solemn and stunned, carried the revelation like a ghost across the palace corridors. The Duke's fortune, legacy, and deepest trust had bypassed Prince Harry entirely. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It started with a quiet knock on the door of Edward's private study. The royal executor, cloaked in discretion and urgency, handed over a sealed envelope, the contents of which would alter the course of royal inheritance forever. What Edward read inside turned his complexion pale. Those who saw him afterward said he looked like a man who had glimpsed a secret too dangerous to speak aloud. The staff outside the room reported hushed voices, a few audible fragments, not Harry, to the boy, that were enough to send tremors through the palace rumour mill. But this wasn't idle gossip. Within minutes, Edward had requested a complete lockdown of the East Wing, and Camilla, curiously, was denied entry entirely. That in itself raised questions. Was she suspected of leaking something? Or worse, had she been deliberately excluded from knowing what Philip had decided? The real shock came when the name was spoken aloud behind sealed doors: Prince George. Philip's great-grandson, not yet of age, had been named the beneficiary of a private fortune once thought to be divided among his children and grandchildren. Not Charles, not Edward, not even William, and most devastatingly not Harry. This wasn't a clerical error, nor a matter of outdated paperwork. Advisors close to Edward confirmed that the clause had been revised only months before Philip's passing. It was deliberate, it was precise, and it was a message, one that bypassed the noise of public statements and interviews, and instead carved itself into the legacy of a family already stretched by tension and betrayal. As royal advisors convened in a quiet fury, some speculated whether this clause could even be enforced without igniting a legal war. But others, especially those who had served Philip closely, knew better. The Duke of Edinburgh didn't do things accidentally. This was a legacy correction, one that bypassed emotion and went straight to principle. Prince George had been chosen, not as a child, but as a symbol, a new foundation. And the decision left one burning question in everyone's minds: why was Harry erased so cleanly from the man who once called him a brave lad? But what drove Prince Philip, the family's iron backbone, to make such a devastating decision? To understand, we must unravel the buried chapters of betrayal and bloodline. Behind palace doors, the Duke of Edinburgh had long held silent judgments. While the public saw a grandfatherly figure, inside, Philip was furious, a man torn by Harry's decisions, his departure, and the headlines that followed. And now, it appears, he left more than silence. He left a judgment sealed in ink. The unraveling began when Harry walked away, not from the family alone, but from the institution Philip had helped hold together through scandal, death, and transition. The Sussex departure wasn't just a resignation from royal duties. In Philip's eyes, it was a strike against every value he had spent a lifetime protecting. And though he never said so publicly, the Duke made his position known in quieter, colder ways. Sources close to the palace confirmed that Philip wrote several private letters to Harry during the turbulent months after the exit, handwritten, personal, offering guidance, pleading even. But none were answered. Not a single reply, not a phone call, not a sign of reconciliation. And in the walls of Windsor, that silence echoed louder than any interview ever could. Then came the broadcast that shattered everything: the Oprah interview. For Philip, already in declining health, it wasn't just a scandal, it was betrayal. According to those closest to him, the Duke watched the segment from his private quarters and left the room before it ended, muttering, "This is not the way of our blood." In that moment, the distance between grandfather and grandson became a chasm too wide to bridge. He had always believed that the monarchy must stand above grievance. But what Harry had done, in Philip's view, was more than a grievance. It was a disowning of duty, a rejection of legacy. One palace aide, speaking on condition of anonymity, revealed that Philip saw himself not as a sentimental man, but as a steward of tradition. In that light, the clause excluding Harry was not simply a punishment, it was a shield, drawn to protect what little remained untainted. and though the Queen never publicly criticized her grandson, Philip watched her heartbreak quietly consume her. Her eyes dulled with every scandal. Her voice grew distant with every leak. And as she mourned a living fracture in her family, Philip made the decision he could no longer delay. The clause was not born of hatred, it was born of heartbreak, of disappointment that ran so deep it could no longer be spoken aloud. In the world Philip came from, honor wasn't something you wore, it was something you upheld, even when it hurt. By the time he amended the will, the Duke's mind was clear. The line had been crossed, and what had once been an inheritance meant to strengthen the next generation was now repurposed as a message to all future heirs. Loyalty is the crown's true currency. But if Harry was cut off as an act of retribution, then why was Prince George, barely a teenager, named the sole heir to Philip's private estate? He didn't ask for it. He didn't know it was coming. But as ink met parchment, Prince George became the youngest royal in modern history to inherit a private fortune, and the pressure of a legacy crafted by a man who knew war, duty and sacrifice. In the quiet aftermath of Philip's will being unsealed, what emerged was not merely an act of inheritance, it was a coronation of character. George, barely a teenager, had been chosen not for his age or his status, but for what he represented: continuity, control, and the fragile hope of restoring dignity to a fractured monarchy. Within the will, Philip had made one thing unmistakably clear: this was not about bloodline alone. It was about values. About the invisible thread that bound the old world to the new, and about a boy who had, in Philip's eyes, been raised to protect both. Under the guidance of William and Catherine, two royals, Philip watched with a keen, critical eye. George had emerged as a quiet embodiment of the crown's future. Reserved, dutiful, unscathed by scandal. That was enough. That was everything. The clause naming George as heir to Philip's private trust wasn't limited to cash or titles. It extended to land holdings in the Scottish Highlands, military heirlooms locked away from public view, and deeply personal archives that Philip never allowed into the royal collection. These were not just assets, they were memories forged in sacrifice. And now they belonged to George, not to his father, not to his uncles, to him. The palace, though outwardly silent, buzzed with questions no one dared voice. Why had Charles, the future king, been bypassed for such personal treasures? Why had Harry, the once beloved grandson, been written out entirely? And why had William, the present embodiment of the monarchy, not been chosen as custodian of his grandfather's most intimate legacy? The answer, though never spoken aloud, reverberated through the private corridors of power. Philip was sending a message. Loyalty was not owed. It had to be proven. George was still young, but in the eyes of a dying patriarch, that youth was a canvas not yet tainted by ego, ambition, or rebellion. It was a bet, a burden, and a warning to those who believed inheritance came without consequence. Royal staff described the atmosphere as tense, uneasy. Whispers swirled about the psychological weight now placed on a child barely aware of the war waging around his name. But perhaps that was Philip's intent, to shape George not with words, but with responsibility that could not be ignored. And within that quiet burden lay irony so sharp, it cut through generations. What Philip had denied to those who had once stood closest to him, he now gave to the one who stood furthest from fault, the great-grandson who still had time to get it right. The future, as Philip wrote in a separate codicil, belongs to those not yet corrupted by choice. That choice had been made, and the family would be forced to live with it. But if Philip intended to crown George with his personal treasures, what did this mean for the royal family's internal balance, and more importantly, for Prince William? When William learned the truth, he didn't celebrate, he broke. Palace sources claim he locked himself in his study for hours, because the clause, while honouring George, was a brutal reminder of what William never received from his grandfather or his own father. In that moment, the future king wasn't thinking about titles, legacy, or duty. He was thinking about absence, about a childhood spent in the shadows of tradition, performing under the weight of expectation without ever hearing the words that mattered. Philip's will, so decisive in its praise of George, was silent when it came to William, not an acknowledgement, not a gesture, just a void where a grandson's name should have lived. For William, who had always played the part, followed the script, kept the firm intact, this omission was more than painful, it was personal. Those around him said the storm brewing inside wasn't envy. It was a lifetime of quiet disappointment finally speaking back, and the conflict tore at him. Because how could he grieve and still feel pride? George was his son, his future, his hope. But the very honor that had bypassed him was now being placed on George's shoulders. Shouldn't that be enough? Shouldn't he be proud? Catherine tried to reach him with gentle words. George deserves this, but so did you. And that's where the pain lived between what was right and what was fair. The private letters from Philip to William, long buried and seldom spoken of, resurfaced in his mind. Letters that were filled with instruction, not affection. Orders, not warmth. Philip had raised William as a royal, not as a grandson. He had demanded resilience, not vulnerability. And now, in death, he had made one final choice that confirmed what William always feared: he had never truly been seen. That old wound being second to Charles, forgotten in the gravitational pull of royal succession, split open again. Diana had once said it during a fight with Charles, words William overheard and never forgot. "They always overlook you, darling." At the time, he didn't understand. Now, as a father himself, he understood too well. And yet he said nothing. Not to Charles, not to Edward, not to anyone. Because what could he say? Any protest would sound like ambition. Any sorrow would be mistaken for rivalry with his own child. So he swallowed the grief, just as he always had. Pressed his fingers into his temples, sat alone in silence, and told himself the truth he was trained to believe. Duty comes before emotion. But the emotion didn't die. It lingered, and it reshaped something in him. He became quieter, more guarded, less trusting of the system that had raised him and then turned its gaze elsewhere. Behind palace walls, staff whispered that William had changed since the clause. Not visibly, but profoundly. And perhaps that too was part of Philip's legacy, reminding William that the crown is not a reward, it's a responsibility, and not all responsibilities come with recognition. But the emotional storm inside William was nothing compared to the fury erupting across the Atlantic when Harry found out. Prince Harry's fury couldn't be contained. When news of the will reached Montecito, walls shook. According to insiders, Harry felt not just disinherited but disowned. A final betrayal from a man he once revered. And in that moment, any chance of reconciliation with the monarchy vanished. It wasn't a phone call, it wasn't even a letter. The truth reached Harry through a third-party advisor in London, an estate solicitor not bound by emotion, only duty. The message was clinical. Prince Philip's personal fortune and military legacy had been passed in full to Prince George. No mention of Harry. No clause for revision, not even a ceremonial token, just absence, deafening, deliberate absence. And as the words sank in, Harry's face reportedly went pale, then red, then broken. "So I was never enough for them," he snapped, pacing the room with a rage that left even his closest aides stunned. In that moment, it wasn't about money. It was about identity, about lineage, about being erased by the very institution that once paraded him as a proud grandson of the crown. Meghan's reaction was colder, sharper. She reportedly looked at Harry and said, "You expected differently." Her words cut, not out of cruelty but clarity. To her, this was not shocking, it was inevitable. The final move of a system that had always placed loyalty to structure above love for blood. But to Harry, who once adored his grandfather, who had served beside him in uniform, who had tried again and again to bridge the gap even after leaving the firm, this was a scar across his legacy, and it burned deeper than any tabloid headline. Behind closed doors, Harry's team scrambled. They contacted legal experts in both the UK and California, trying to determine if there was any legal foothold to contest the clause. But every conversation ended the same way, with a warning. Any challenge would be public suicide. The monarchy, though bruised, still carried global favour, and to fight the will of a war hero, a family patriarch, would be seen as vindictive, selfish. Harry's advisors urged restraint, but restraint was the very thing he'd lost. He disappeared for 3 days, refusing public appearances, ignoring calls. Friends described him as a man mourning a relationship that had been dead for years, but he never buried. The pain was raw, but what haunted him most was the detail or lack thereof. Not only had he been denied inheritance, he hadn't even been acknowledged. No letter, no sentence, not a word in the will. As if he never existed, as if his service, his love, his rebellion, all meant nothing. To be ignored entirely by a man he once called a giant in my life was an emotional decapitation. And yet, the silence from the palace only deepened the wound. No message from Charles, none from William. The only sound across the ocean was the ticking of a clock that had once united them all in legacy and now echoed with division. But then, from within that silence, came an unexpected voice. Not loud, not angry, but filled with purpose. Yet in the midst of this transatlantic storm, one royal stepped forward not to escalate, but to explain. Prince Edward broke decades of silence. He had stayed silent for decades, the quiet royal, the forgotten son. But now Prince Edward stepped into the light not to claim anything, but to reveal the secret clause only he had been entrusted to deliver. And in doing so, he ignited a truth that shook the monarchy's foundations. For most of his life, Edward had existed in the royal margins, never vying for attention, never chasing titles, never leaking stories to the press. But what the world didn't see was the bond he shared with Prince Philip, quiet, unwavering, built on trust and a mutual disdain for spectacle. In Philip's final years, it was Edward who sat with him, listened to him, walked the gardens with him when his legs were tired and the weight of the family scandals grew unbearable. And it was Edward alone who was entrusted with the full, unedited version of the will, along with a letter no solicitor ever read. It wasn't just legal, it was spiritual. A final confession from a man who had seen too much and forgiven too little. Edward's voice didn't tremble as he read it aloud, though many believed he would never. "I'll speak publicly again after Philip's funeral. Tell them why I chose George," the letter began, its ink barely faded. And so Edward did. In a chamber packed with stunned royals and stunned silence, he delivered the words his father had scribbled in the stillness of declining days. He spoke of duty, of disappointment, of the pain Philip carried watching the family he built splinter into factions. And then he revealed the sentence no one expected to hear. "My father loved Harry but feared what he had become." The room shifted, a collective breath drawn in, because love alone had not been enough. Philip had seen in Harry a storm, a man lost to ideology, to media, to a war between self and institution. And he had made a choice to protect the future, not dwell in the past. The clause had been signed 2 months before Philip was admitted to hospital for the final time. It was not a deathbed whim. It was a deliberate act, forged while the Duke's mind was sharp, and his intention unshakable. Edward revealed that the will had been rewritten in near secrecy, with only the royal legal advisor and a notary present. No senior royal knew, not Charles, not even the Queen. And that perhaps was the boldest betrayal of all, not the content of the clause, but its concealment. For Philip to move in silence was nothing new, but for Edward to be the vessel of that silence, and then the voice of its unveiling, was a shift no one saw coming. In delivering those words, Edward didn't rise in status. He didn't claim a new place within the hierarchy. He simply fulfilled a final promise, one that demanded courage, one that cost him relationships, and one that made him, for the first time, the central figure in a royal reckoning. The will had spoken, the reason had been given, and now the monarchy had to live with it. But even as Edward revealed the truth, the royal household moved swiftly and ruthlessly to manage the optics. The will was no longer just a family matter, it was now a crisis. The palace launched legacy lockdown, a covert operation to control the fallout. Leaks were hunted, press briefings were altered, and a new narrative was crafted to shield the monarchy's deepest fracture. In the immediate hours following Edward's revelation, The Royal Communications Office went into full containment mode. Press officers, briefed under tight secrecy, were instructed to stick to a version of the story that emphasized continuity and tradition, while quietly scrubbing any mention of conflict. But the inconsistencies were glaring. One outlet was told George had been named a symbolic recipient. Another reported the inheritance was modest and ceremonial. Meanwhile, independent investigators confirmed otherwise. Land deeds had been transferred, private holdings shifted, and trusts activated. The truth was too big to hide, yet too dangerous to confirm. Behind palace gates, the scramble had begun, not to correct the narrative, but to control it. Camilla's aides, sensing a growing storm, moved to reframe the inheritance as a private family honor, attempting to erase George's central role altogether. That move backfired spectacularly. Tensions erupted between Clarence House and Kensington Palace, with William reportedly confronting senior aides in a private meeting, demanding, "Who gave permission to erase my son?" Catherine, usually composed and diplomatic, was said to have lost her patience. Her words, spoken with ice and resolve, were clear. "Do not drag my son into this circus." It wasn't a request. It was a line drawn, and it rattled those who had underestimated her. As the scandal grew, whispers emerged of intelligence agencies being quietly looped in. MI5, though never officially acknowledged in royal matters, was rumoured to have flagged a pattern of communication breaches within palace staff. One particular leak, a voice message shared with a foreign tabloid, triggered a wave of firings across Clarence House. Emails were wiped, phones were seized. Staff who had served the firm for decades were escorted out, no explanations, no farewells. The monarchy was under siege, and the enemy was no longer external. It was internal. It was truth. Charles, stuck at the heart of the storm, was paralysed. Bound by loyalty to his late father, but terrified of public backlash, he said nothing. No statement, no defence, just silence wrapped in protocol. Behind closed doors, sources say he confided to a single aide, "I can't protect the crown and defy it at the same time." The weight of that paradox bled into every decision or indecision he made. Meanwhile, journalists began to circle like sharks. The phrase "royal rupture" appeared on headlines from London to New York. The monarchy, once bulletproof, now looked exposed. And just when the palace believed they had contained the worst, a royal archivist uncovered something that changed everything. A sealed envelope, hidden behind a false panel in Philip's private safe. Its contents still unknown, its existence undeniable. A single item no one accounted for, one document, untouched by handlers, lawyers, or advisors. And what it held would not only validate Philip's final decision, it would redefine it entirely. But amid the chaos, one document was found hidden in Philip's personal safe that cast new light on the entire inheritance. It was handwritten, folded 3 times, and marked only with the letter G. Inside was a message meant for one person but now read by many. In it, Prince Philip laid bare his regrets, his hopes, and a single haunting sentence: "You carry all our names but none of our mistakes." The letter had been tucked beneath an old leather case of naval medals, found in the back of Philip's private safe, a relic hidden in plain sight. It wasn't drafted by legal hands or filtered through courtiers. This was raw, personal, an unedited glimpse into a man who rarely spoke of emotion but now, in his final words, poured it out with unexpected tenderness and brutal clarity. It was addressed to George, though it wasn't meant for his young eyes yet. It was a message carved in legacy, one that acknowledged not just the burden of bloodline, but the cost of carrying it. Philip confessed more than anyone expected. He wrote of choices he didn't make, of apologies he never gave, and of the crushing silence he had passed down like a tradition. Spoke of Diana not with disdain, but with a sorrow that bordered on guilt. He wrote, "She saw cracks in us I refused to face." He admitted that too often he'd chosen discipline over understanding, protocol over presence. "I watched your father grow under rules I never softened," he wrote, "and I saw Harry shatter from the very silence I imposed." These were not the words of a prince, but of a man haunted by mischances. But the letter wasn't just about grief. It was a roadmap, one meant to warn George of the crossroads ahead. Philip cautioned him that fame is fleeting if not grounded in honor. That public affection is a tide, not a foundation. And above all, that a royal voice without loyalty becomes noise. There will be moments, he wrote, where you'll be asked to choose between being royal and being liked. Choose the crown. It does not beg for applause, it endures. It was a chilling echo of the monarchy's long-held philosophy: sacrifice self for survival. And then, with ink pressed deeply into the page, Philip ended with a line that broke hearts across the palace. "I give you not just what I had, but what I should have given your father." It was more than an inheritance, it was an admission. That William, though steady and loyal, had been denied the very legacy now bestowed upon his son. That the recognition William craved had come a generation too late. And in that moment, the entire royal line seemed suspended in both blessing and burden, caught between what had been withheld and what had finally been given. But just when the royal family thought the firestorm was over, one final twist emerged. Philip's clause wasn't the only hidden surprise. The final page of the W.I.L., overlooked in the original reading, carried a clause so unprecedented it stunned even the Crown's legal advisors. Prince Philip didn't just leave his fortune to George, he assigned its protection. And the name on that line wasn't Charles. It wasn't William. It was Catherine. The revelation came quietly but landed like a thunderclap. Catherine, Princess of Wales, was named custodian of legacy assets, a title with no ceremonial fluff, just raw, sweeping authority over everything Philip had entrusted to George. Properties, trusts, military heirlooms, and private correspondences were now under her direct stewardship until George came of age. It wasn't just a legal safeguard, it was a message written in bold defiance of the old order. In bypassing Charles, Philip had done more than shake tradition, he had surgically removed layers of inherited entitlement, and Camilla, already walking a tightrope of acceptance, was left completely sidelined. Word from inside Clarence's house was that she erupted in disbelief. "She has no standing," she reportedly said, but the will said otherwise. The will was final. What made the clause even more powerful was the emotional contradiction it carried. Catherine had not shared private time with Philip in his final weeks. Illness, distance, and protocol made it nearly impossible. And yet, it was her he trusted with everything. Not because of their shared moments, but because of what she represented. Dignity, restraint, unshakable loyalty. In a family where scandal had become currency, Catherine's silence had become her strength. She had earned something no one else could claim: Philip's posthumous faith. And with that came a shift no one anticipated. As William prepared for his future kingship, it was Catherine who now held the keys to the past. Inside the firm, reactions were divided. Princess Anne reportedly nodded in quiet approval, calling it a smart move from an old soldier. But others weren't as accepting. Whispers of resentment circled among Charles's inner circle, furious that this quiet power play had been slipped in under their noses. Still, legally, nothing could be undone. Catherine's position was not symbolic, it was binding. And in a monarchy built on centuries of precedent, a modern royal woman now stood as the final gatekeeper to the legacy of its most formidable patriarch. In one final act of foresight, Philip didn't just choose who would carry his name, he chose who would protect it. Catherine had been tested not with titles, but with silence, and now she stood, unchallenged, as the most powerful woman in the monarchy behind the throne. And so, with one signature and two names, Prince Philip reshaped the monarchy's future, ensuring that his legacy would live not through bloodline alone, but through loyalty, silence, and chosen heirs. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.